welcome back to my show. I'm Fanus Botha, your host for this journey, and today we've got a great conversation in store for you. Our guest for this week is Fanus Botha. Now, Fanus is firstly a good friend, and today's conversation will be very much wide-ranging. We will talk about Land Rovers, we'll talk about CrossFit, and then obviously what this podcast is mostly about, all things property related. Now, Fanus is a consulting engineer at Gtegno Engineers here in Potchefstroom, and as you guessed from the intro, he drives a Land Rover, and we regularly CrossFit together as well. Now, Fanus, welcome to the show. It is so good to have you here.
Thanks, Francois. I'm really excited to be here with you. I think it's going to be really fun. This is my first official podcast recording that I've ever done. So yeah, I'm really excited. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
Okay, Fanus, awesome. Let's get into it. You, as the intro said, you are a consulting engineer. Can you just give us a little bit of background? What do you do? What did you study? How did you get here? And what's a typical day look like for you?
All right, yeah. So as you said, I'm from Gtegno Consulting Engineers. We consult mostly in the civil engineering field. All right, so we do have two disciplines that we basically focus on. The first one is that we do structures, foundations, reinforced concrete slabs, roofs. We actually do zip lines and all sorts of crazy structures as well. So a lot of different types of things that we do in terms of structures. And then there's also the civil services side where we look at the stormwater and sewer and things like that. So a typical day for me always starts with a good cup of coffee, obviously. And then, we mostly work in the private sector. So we do a lot of residential houses, new houses. We write reports. I might go and do an investigation on a roof for solar maybe. That's one of the new things that we do often these days. Just maybe go and do a site inspection. I love spending time with the people on site as well. So that's what makes my job fun for me. That's the quality part for me. And then I might go back to the office and quickly try and get a design out. Maybe look at a portal frame, steel structure, do the design calcs for that. Yeah, so it's a lot of different things, and I really, really enjoy that.
Okay, so we're going to get back to all of those things, but I would like to start out at a certain point. We had a coffee a while ago, and you said something about Land Rovers that intrigued me. And we all have heard all the jokes about Land Rovers and oil leaks and all these things. But you indicated that you've got a specific method or specific way that you look at Land Rovers and by which you decide whether to buy one or not. Can you give us an idea of that? Where did you start with Land Rovers and why do you love them? And then just a few insights to, okay, if you need to buy one, how do you make that decision? What do you look for? What's the red flags? How do you think about that?
All right, yeah. So I am a big Land Rover fan, and that's one of the first things that my friends usually get out of the bag to try and hammer me with. But I would never drive something else. Well, never is a long time, but at the moment I'm really, really happy with my Land Rover. So my dad drives a Land Rover, my brother drives a Land Rover, and myself as well. We all decided to standardize on that because, with all the fixing, we can swap out parts and whatever. No, not really. We just all enjoy Land Rovers. I think you probably get two separate fields of people in terms of buying Land Rover. You get the ones that are privileged enough to buy a new Land Rover with a motor plan. All right, I've never been in that category before. I think if you can do that, that's great. You're going to get the joys, and if something goes wrong, you just drive to the workshop and they will sort it out for you. In my case, though, I usually buy them out of motor plan because that's when you get the big saving. For instance, you can probably get a second-hand Land Rover, and I don't know if people always know that, for probably about 25% of the price of a new Land Rover. And then obviously if it's out of motor plan, you need to do some homework to not buy something that you're going to regret later. So what are some of those things? I think it's probably applicable to most second-hand car buys that you do. But specifically for Land Rover, I've had a few things that I've done before. So I don't have a specific list, but the one thing that I definitely always do is if you phone the people, ask them to send you the service record of the vehicle, go to the last service that was indicated in that book, all right, and then just give a phone call to that company who did that specific last service, all right, because we all know that sometimes people just sell a car because the fix to fix whatever was wrong was just too expensive. So that's why I phone them, and I've had it many times where I phoned that company, asked them for the report for the last service that was done, and then from that I could see, okay, no, they declined whatever, X, Y, and Z. This needed to be done. They needed to replace the shocks, whatever the case might be. And then obviously I didn't decide to buy those cars. But sometimes, a funny thing, I've noticed that if you want to buy a second-hand Land Rover, that's just from me, it might be a good idea to look for one in the Sandton area, because you're looking for that one that they didn't go off-roading with, but that the mummy just went to school with the kids and drove back. So funny enough, a lot of the good buys that we've had in the past came all from the Sandton area. And then, second thing is that it's a little bit more technical, but if you can manage it, I'm just opening my phone here, you get a nice error reader, iCarSoft. You can see the person that I sent it to here is also Henry, also driving a Land Rover. So if you can read the codes, the error codes or error messages, you can take that thing with you. So you make an appointment, drive out to the person, plug that thing in, it'll give you all the errors that they try to hide or whatever it is that you don't see. Okay, so that's the second thing, is get an error reader. If you're not technical, you don't understand what the messages are, I've taken my mechanic with me as well. You have to make sure these things are expensive. So the buying price might be low, but if something breaks, it's going to cost a bit of money. And then, I'm just trying to remember. The third thing that I've done as well is that you can do a 164-point check at any Land Rover. Then they go through the Land Rover from top to bottom. It's the things that you usually miss when you go and look at a vehicle. Are all 5 or 7 or whatever the case might be speakers actually working? They check every single seat belt, the volume button of the radio. Sometimes we sort of rush through the inspection. You take it for a test drive, and you see, okay, the engine sounds fine, whatever the case might be. But sometimes the things that bite you are the small things, like then you switch on the radio, and you try and insert a USB stick and it's not reading. And then you find out, that's not working. So that 164-point check costs a bit of money, but I always try to force the people selling it to me to first go and do that 164-point check. And I've learned quite a few things from that in the past. And then you can decide if it's worth still going ahead with that. Or not. So it's just, being diligent, making sure that you've checked all of the things. It's got air suspension. That's a very important thing to check. If it's completed lifting the vehicle, it's supposed to stay like that. And while you're doing the inspection, the compressor is not supposed to switch on again. So I've had it before while we were standing there, the vehicle's already raised where the compressor started. Then there's probably a leak in one of the air shocks. So it's small things like that. But yeah.
That's really interesting. The error reader that you refer to, is that something you need to buy, or can you borrow it and use it for specific, or do you have it on hand?
Yeah, you can buy it, but if you have had a lot of Land Rovers like me, it's probably best to have one yourself. Yeah. Because it just gives you peace of mind, even if there is something wrong where you get stuck somewhere, you know exactly what's going on. It also helps with the cost afterwards, because if we like doing the diagnosis ourselves, me and my brother, and then we actually order the parts, get all the cheapest parts, and then we just ask somebody, we tell them that's the problem, here's the part, just fix it for me. Because I've spent probably about 30,000 Rand at dealerships where they fixed things that wasn't the problem. And then that's a very sticky situation to try and get out of. So yeah, that's also part of, it's going to save you money afterwards as well if you buy that thing. And it's not that expensive. I think it's probably about 1,600 Rand or so for the reader. So it's not a very expensive thing. And you get different ones. You get one for Ford and Land Rover, whatever. So that's just a handy thing to have at hand.
And what I love, we are so conditioned when we buy a car to just look at the service record. It's got a full service record, and you're happy and you go on. But it's exactly what you say, because myself and we're all in that position. You service your car and you get told, okay, listen, in the next 5,000 kilometers, you'll have to do A, B, C, D, and E, and it's going to cost you this or that. And then, obviously, I didn't try to sell my car, but you'll obviously get people then, okay, let's rather sell the car. And you look at the service record, happy days, it's fully serviced, but then you buy that problems, and it might not be disclosed to you, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. So actually phoning the guys, getting that last report is I think, a good principle to have in life. And I think that's going to get into all the things we're going to chat about property as well. Now, that's great. Now, the next topic
I wanted to say one last thing before we go on. Why I like Land Rover, I know that there might be a little bit more problems. If you go and look at the customer satisfaction rating of Land Rover, it's probably going to be very low. But that's just the type of person I am. If I look at the specs of my Land Rover and I compare it to another SUV in the same price class, almost 90% of the times you'll see that Land Rover beats the other vehicles in that same range with almost every single specification. So you get a lot more out of the vehicle. With that 3 liter, you're going to get a lot more performance than out of the other vehicle. Is it possible now that because you are increasing the stress and whatever the case might be on that vehicle, that you might have some more issues? Yes, that's true. But the pleasure of driving the vehicle is just so much more than, holding back and not having the same power that you would get out of a Land Rover. So that's sort of just why I like Land Rover. You mentioned that at the beginning as well.
No, obviously. And it's so interesting because we're speaking about Land Rovers, but we're also speaking about principles as well. Principle of diligence, but then also a principle now of joy and enjoyment and fulfillment and happiness, or whatever the case might be, that you get from your things, that you get from your vehicle. And we're going to delve into that with property as well, the happiness and the enjoyment factor that you need to get from that as well. But it's exactly as you say. I think so many times we purchase a car and for various other reasons, but there's other cars actually. And myself, I drive a Honda Accord that it's not I also bought it secondhand, but everything else for that same price. This car has got amazing specs inside, and it's a joy to drive. And I just love the car, but everyone else would, you don't see many of them on the road, and I don't think many people want to buy it, and they think a Honda Accord is an old person's car. And I think if you can just get past the keeping up with the Joneses or whatever it might be, how you look to the next person, what they think of your car, then you can actually buy something that you might enjoy much more than you actually thought.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we've got kids, you've got kids. And then that's the question of buying secondhand or buying new. For me, it's a no-brainer. If I bought a new car and I had to spend all that money and I go and park at the mall and someone opens the door, I can't sleep for a week because it just bugs me. Who is that person? Why did he do this to me now? And we drive home from the movies and my kid takes his popcorn home, he lets it fall on the seat, and then we've got a big fight and it comes in with my family where, with a second-hand car, if some stuff will happen, it's just sort of that peace of mind for me as well. It's not that I don't look after them, but it's just I'm just a bit more comfortable. My kid and I would like him to have his popcorn there. I don't want to be that guy who says, this is going to have to be clean. I don't know how you operate, but for me...
No, it's exactly the same. And Rickett, doing the videos for everyone out there, we just had this conversation before we started. I grew up basically as a single child. My sister is 9 years younger than me. So we never actually, when she was in primary school and I was in high school, so we just missed each other. I was in hostel, and I grew up. I mean, the car is like a church. You can't eat in the car, nothing. And now I've got 3 kids. You've got 2 kids. I'm in my car now. I just had to drop my middle kid off to school at the tennis. So it looks like a wardrobe at the back. You had to change clothes, everything, eat in the car. It's like you live in the car. So no, I agree with you totally.
Yeah, and in terms of the price afterwards, people would argue now, but we're looking after it so that we can get the maximum price. Oh, they're going to give you the same price. Let me tell you now, even if you have some extras, you're going to lose all of that. That's another topic as well. But if you take it in for a nice valet, so that's what I do. Sometimes, especially when we're on a holiday, with all the beach sand and sea sand or whatever the case might be in the car, it gets a bit out of hand. But then I just take it for a nice valet, whatever, spend that 500 Rand, and then, it's a brand new car.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. But we have to move on from Land Rovers and cars. Now, this topic, I never would have thought or imagined that we talk on this podcast about that and become one of those podcasts. But the topic is CrossFit. And my journey up to here is quite an interesting one. I was one of the typical people, I think, where I judged CrossFit from the outside very much. And I only saw all the videos of the games and people doing weird things. And I'm like, that's not how a pull-up looks. These guys don't know what they're doing. And you hear about all the injuries and everything. And at some point last year, I randomly got into a CrossFit class. And a shout out to our local CrossFit boxes, Black Ops and Ground Zero. And when I actually went to a class and did a few, I saw what they do, and I realized that it's actually very much the same that I was doing on my own or at home at that stage with mobility and kettlebells and things like that. And it just blew me away. And now I love it. And as you know, I CrossFit pretty much daily now. But you've been on this journey a lot more. And you are actually, I know you've got a big history of I don't know if you can call it professional sport, but athletics and things like that. So if we can transition just for a while to CrossFit and why you love it, what do you think about it? I know you've wanted to start a box or buy a box at a stage. What's the value of CrossFit for you?
Yeah, so I absolutely love CrossFit, like you know. So my journey started, I wouldn't call it professional sport, but I did do athletics and play tennis and whatever the case might be. So I did a lot of sport, maybe to a point that I needed a break from that. So, after completing my studies and started working, I didn't do any exercise for probably about 8 to 9 years. I just couldn't go there again. I would jog a little bit maybe, but I just didn't do anything really. And my wife at a certain point sort of saw that, she thinks there's a change that needs to come. And she saw the people CrossFit, and she just basically signed me up and sent me a message, listen, you're going to CrossFit on Monday. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what CrossFit is, but I actually saw what they were doing in the past, but I didn't know what CrossFit was. And funny story, the first day that I started was probably about 4.5 years ago. They had a 1,000-meter row at the start of the workout, But now I'm still in my mind, I'm still the same 10 years back sportsman. I can do this, I always believe I can do it. But at that point, I thought, no, I've got this, I think it was 1,000-meter row, then some pull-ups and a few dumbbell snatches or something like that. And I started off on that rower, but I gave it everything. And that was pretty much the end of my workout. I was so nauseous after that. I tried really hard to complete the workout, which I eventually did. And at that point, they also wrote the scores down of everyone on the board. And my friend Gili, shout out to Gili, he actually took a picture at the end of the day. So they took all the classes, on the whiteboard, wrote all the scores down, and he took a picture and just told me that he just wanted me to know that while I'm still new, he wanted to save this picture that I got last in that workout out of every single person in the whole box. Ladies, men, everybody was included in that list. So that's where I started. And I realized, oh my goodness, I'm in trouble. But then didn't really love CrossFit that much yet. I didn't know what it was. But then getting into the detail of CrossFit, I think what gets me about CrossFit is the amount of variation and different things that keeps you intrigued all the time. You can always improve on something. So basically, just general cardio, gymnastics, and weightlifting. I think the thing that got me most is the weightlifting. I actually thought, you just have to be strong and you have to get it up. But there's so much technique in the specific lifts that I started, trying to perfect that. And it kept me intrigued, with the gymnastics. Then you have to try and get a bar muscle up. So I had a steel pipe in my backyard that I put between two trees, just to try and keep on training to get my first muscle up. So there's always something that you're not really 100% getting right, and that keeps me intrigued. And then another thing, which is a simple thing, is just the fact that they have the workout already set for you. So I don't have to do any thinking. You just have to get yourself there, and you do whatever the workout is. I think that's also one of the things that I really, really enjoy about it.
No, certainly. And for me, how I actually chose it and started out with it is I realized now with kids and work and everything, and I started my own business, is the only time I can consistently trust to exercise is 5 in the morning. And it has to be with people. I'm not going to jog on my own, get up and go and jog, or go on my own to a gym. And with CrossFit, you have to book your spot, and then there's people waiting for you. The workout is there on the board, and you get into it. So it's exactly as you say.
Yeah, the atmosphere energizes you, and it also gets you to, every time I think to myself, I'm just going to pace this. And then you see, it's just the testosterone in the building, and then you sort of, okay, no, I'm going to go for it. And then you redline, and that's what HIIT training, high intensity training, is all about. Is getting that heart rate to spike in a short amount of time. I think compared to running, for me, CrossFit is amazing because it doesn't take that much time. You're in and out every day just with an hour. Where with running, you need to spend so much time on the road, and I don't know if the right word is monotonous, but it's just the same thing. That's not exactly who I am. I think all the variation in CrossFit just keeps me excited, and there's something new that you can try every time.
That's great. And I want to make the transition from here to property, and I would never once again from CrossFit to property, but over the past few months, and you always have a video on an idea of basically everything. So I get the idea, as with the Land Rovers, you do your research properly. And we've been discussing CrossFit shoes and gear and everything. And I'm up and down between Metcon and Nano for a while now. And at the beginning, I watched my own YouTube videos and everything, and I thought, okay, Nike Metcon, here we go. And then I fitted one, and I don't like this, and now I'm on the Reebok Nano bus. Do you have any thoughts between the two shoes, which one you prefer, and your thoughts about them?
Yeah, so I think first of all, it was a surprise to me that the difference that a proper CrossFit shoe makes, especially if it comes to, let's say, for instance, handstands, push-ups against the wall. It's got a piece of plastic at the back which helps you to properly slide against the wall, and that makes a difference. Where I used to with my running shoe, it gets stuck on the wall and you can't get up, but it takes double the effort. Even with rope climbs, I've messed up one of my pairs of running shoes with coming down a rope, just because it's not made for that, and with weightlifting as well. So I think obviously stability for weightlifting is a big thing that you need to consider. I had Metcons, and I really, really loved them. It was my first CrossFit shoe. To be honest, a CrossFit shoe is, if you fit it for the first time compared to a running shoe, probably a little bit uncomfortable because it needs to be stable. Maybe feels a little bit stiff, but when you get to lifting bigger weights, it's just good to know that you have that support, it actually helps a lot. And then for my birthday, my wife got me, you see, that's where we are now. If you start getting CrossFit things for your birthday, that's when you know you're in trouble. So for my birthday, my wife got me the Nanos as well. And they are a bit more comfortable, but also stable enough to do what it needs to do. So for me, I think it would just be sort of preference and how it fits your foot. But I think probably between the two, you'll be happy with both of them. I'm a Nike fan, to be honest. I like Nike. Looks good. I think it's a prettier shoe than the Nano, but the Nano works really well, and I enjoy it at the moment. Yeah.
I've been up and down with this for months, and I'm just one of those people. It breaks my wife because it takes me so long to get to a decision. I can, for months, this side, that side, change my mind, but it breaks her. And I've sent her multiple WhatsApp and links. Okay, what about this shoe? What about that shoe? Then I decide on a shoe, then it's out of stock, and then I go on. And finally now I've got my box in my boot, so I can't wait to open it. And we've talked about Land Rovers now. We've talked about CrossFit shoes, where CrossFit shoe, it's an expense of, this one was on special now, 1,500 Rand or 2,500 Rand. It can take some of us months to make a decision like that. But then we get to property, we get to a house on a Sunday afternoon with our wife after coffee or a nap. We go and watch a house, we get in, yeah, we love this house, let's buy it. And you make a 3 million Rand expense like that, or decision. Whereas with other purchases, we go through the diligence, we go through all the reviews, we chat to people, we, like you say, the 164-point check at Land Rover, but with a home, we don't do that. And that is where I would like us to transition into now, and just to chat about from your experience regarding these things. I mean, you are also involved in the property game, and more so than I, at that specific places where people need to make decisions, or there's problems, or they actually have to check. Why do you think, and what's your experience with, okay, we have all this diligence with a car, or with shoes, or when we buy a phone or buy a TV, why not with property? Do you see it that people are that diligent with property, or where is the problem?
Yeah, Francois, I think that's a very, very good point, and I think it's something that actually we need to address, because when I look at how I bought my house, for instance, even though I've learned a few things after that as well, there are quite a few things that you actually need to have a look at before you buy the house. But I think it's just the way that it's structured at the moment, with the agents, taking you through. Most of the times the owner or person renting at that place is there. So immediately you walk into an environment that feels a little bit uncomfortable, and they sort of let you feel that you have to quickly check now, but you're gonna, let's just get this clear, you're gonna probably spend, whatever the case might be, 2, 3, 4, 5 million Rand, okay? You're gonna suffer every month to get the bond payment, or to get enough money to pay for that property. But yet we take 30 minutes, if that is even how long it takes, and we get sort of bullet in a way to quickly have a look at what there is, and then you have to make a decision. And if you start getting a little bit fussy, you'll quickly notice that the agents will tell you, there is someone else that just phoned 5 minutes before we came, and they've got cash apparently, I heard, And then you get yourself, sort of panicking because there are some things that you like. Your wife sees the kitchen and she's like, oh, we have to have this place. And then you just go for it. You buy the property, and then when the first time you move in there, you try and flush the toilet, you've got some sewage coming out at a different spot, or you've got water leaking through the walls. I think it's just very important to sort of take a breath, and make sure that, just like we did for the shoes now or for the Land Rover, get that checklist in place and that we go through things. So what am I talking about? I think it would be a good idea to get a structural engineer to come and have a look at specifically the roof. Most roofs consist of timber trusses. Now, timber is good for many years if it's not exposed to water. Okay, so temperature, drying out is a factor, but it's supposed to be fine for many years to come, except when it gets water damaged. And that's something that you won't know other than by getting into the roof, getting a roof inspector, getting a structural engineer to physically get into the roof and sort of walk through and see where were the leaks in the past, which members are troublesome at that stage. Obviously, we know about the electrical COC that you need to get as well. That's also a very big thing that you need to get a professional in to come and have a look at that. From my side, if you have seen so many houses as I have before, I can see where people closed some cracks. I can see where a crack maybe goes down to foundation level. You can quickly see that there is no apron around the house, which is a good thing to have for any foundation, to just keep the water away from the foundation for that first section. So that it's small things that you can get valuable information from, just sort of getting someone to indicate where could the problems lie, and also how to address them. Is it a make or break crack? Is this a structural crack that your house will fall apart, or is it just sort of aesthetic? It won't be a problem in the future. I think that list that we have spoken about before is something that we need to get in place to be able to do a check on a house like we do for a vehicle. Finer things like even switching on the stove if it's got a built-in stove, or checking every single thing, checking the lights, checking the taps that they worked. There are so many things that you can check for. And
just as a side note, you referred to a list, and now the pressure is on us to get that list up and running and going before this podcast rolls out. But it will be up and running. So for everyone listening or viewing, whatever the case might be, it would be in the show notes and will be available on my website. Hopefully your website is up and running by then. But obviously just something that, when you buy a property, my wife and I, we went through exactly the same thing. We bought in 2008. We were just married. I was give or take 25. She was 24. You go into the house. You're just, okay, we're looking for 2 garages, so many rooms, this and that. You go in. As you say, the people currently, in our situation, it was actually people were renting the place, and they were quite unhappy because now they have to move out, find another place to rent. So you just actually run through it as quickly as possible, and okay, let's do it. And when we moved in, and at that time I didn't know that, okay, we can afterwards maybe issue a summons, or because things weren't disclosed or whatever the case might be, but some of the taps weren't working, and there's issues. And nobody guides us with these things. And we've got the property disclosure form now that has to be part of the contract. But once again, you depending on a seller to disclose everything that's wrong with the property. And maybe it's like the Land Rover, no, it's been serviced every time, don't worry. And then you move in and there's problems. Can you give us some real life examples that you've come across of people buying a property, moving in, and then afterwards they're seeing something, or something happens, or something breaks, and it could have been prohibited with just proper inspection or diligence?
Yeah, no, definitely. Just the one case that I'm thinking about now is actually a property that had quite a big swimming pool. And when the people moved in, they just noticed, listen, this water level is sort of going down quite a lot faster than it's just, normal damp or condensation happening. And they discovered that after getting us to come and have a look, we discovered that there was quite a long crack in the concrete of that swimming pool. So that's sort of the things that can happen and that you just need to look for. I don't think people will always be able to still hide some things, but I think there are basic things that we need to look at. We've had quite a few cases where the roofing structure had some of the top members breaking, or some of the purlins, cracking, and then you can see the roof sagging after a big wind, which wasn't disclosed. So things like that I've seen before. I'm just thinking, it's not a new house now, but there was one specific place where they removed an internal wall. Okay, but it was a firewall built all the way to the top of the roof, and they removed the bottom part below the ceiling and then just closed the ceiling up and left the gable sitting in the roof. All right, people bought the house like that, and then there was a tremor, small tremor, not even a big one, and that all the bricks came down on their furniture, broke tables, and it was expensive wooden tables. And they had to deal with that afterwards. So that's also something that if you just had a roofing specialist get up into the roof, they would tell you, listen, did you know that you have an additional wall sitting in the roof that's not supported, which is dangerous. So yes, that's some of the things that I've seen before.
I want to get into a few specific things. We don't have to talk a long time about each one of them, but it's things you've touched on in conversations that people need to maybe think of or think about or just make sure. But you mentioned one now as well. You refer to an apron around the house. Is that the piece of meter cement that runs around the whole of the property, the house? That's
right, yeah. So that actually helps a lot if the slope of the apron is not towards the house. I actually get that as well. People, they cast the apron and it was fine at that time, but then they also have a tree 3 meters away from the apron, and then the roots lifts up the apron, and at the end when I get there, it slopes toward the house, and you want to get that water away just for the first meter. It's a small thing that makes quite a big difference in terms of foundation. If you have maybe downpipes concentrating water at a specific area and you don't have proper stormwater drainage, that wet area is usually where we see the cracks. And then another very important thing is that most of the cracks that I see that when I do inspections or write reports on older houses is where people extended in the past, where they did extensions to the house. So it's very difficult in terms of a structure to build something new and to get it to marry with an old existing structure. You've got a different type of clay bricks with different thermal expansion coefficient than the new bricks that you are using. And just with the sun shining on both of them, this one will move slightly different to what this one will, and you will get a small crack in between there. So just having a look at the extensions and how they were done, and maybe afterwards just fixing it in a way with a movement control joint at that point, for instance, is something that's very important. That's also where sometimes with the roofs you get a lot of leaking places because they just extended. They want to make this bigger, but they didn't really think about the roof at that specific point, and that's where they start cutting corners. Just adding a roof where the slope is too little. For instance, normal corrugated sheeting not a lot of people know this, but the minimum gradient for that is 7.5 degrees. Okay, and the reason for that is simply if you get a big storm, the water will overflow and you will have leaks if you don't have a steep enough angle on that. So that's sort of small things. If you're gonna buy a house with a corrugated sheet that's got a 2-degree slope from one side to the other, you're gonna have trouble unless it's rubberized from one end to the other side. But that's sort of one of those things where I would be able to tell you, or a specialist would be able to tell you, don't go this way. You're gonna land in some trouble.
Okay, you've talked about roofs quite a bit now, and I know it's something that you're quite passionate about, and a lot of your work is in that. And we actually talked yesterday about an example, and you showed me some photos about you had to inspect a roof, and the guy said, no, everything is fine, don't worry. And when you got into the roof, it's like, listen, there's some of these trusses that's gone, that's rotten. So it's one of those things, if you don't see it, you don't worry about it until it's too late. And now, what's obviously one of the big things in South Africa now is adding load to your roof, putting on solar panels. We've got load shedding, and we just add 4 or 8 or whatever the case might be panels on our roof. Do you see issues with that? Is it something that you have to check beforehand, get someone out? Is a roof made only for a specific carry load, if I can call it that? What's the red flags that people should look out for?
Okay, so yeah, definitely I think it is important that you have a look at the roof structure before you just go and add solar panels. So a solar panel is not that heavy, usually about 15 kilograms per square meter is sort of the weight that we usually work with, and which it doesn't sound a lot, but if you go and look at a 10 by 10 meter square, you're already looking at 1.5 tons of weight that you're adding to your roof. And now we're starting to talk about serious weight. It's not just, the small weight that we initially spoke about. So a standard roof, if I may go into some of the specifics, a standard roof is designed for 2 separate loads usually. You get your dead load, which is a permanent load. Okay, so that is your sheeting or your roof tile, or whatever the case might be, okay? And then we also add a live load. Okay, now a live load is for all the, it's not a permanent load, so things that will be added. So let's say you want to do some maintenance, you get a painting team of 10 people to get onto the roof. That's what that live load is for. Also snow, heavy hail that could stack up on the roof. That's what that live load was allowed for. Now, a standard roof, it's a calculation that you need to do, but a standard roof can take around about 30 kilograms per square meter of live load, okay? And now you can already see what people are doing here. They are assuming, and we all know you shouldn't assume, they are assuming that it will be fine if the solar panels are 15 kilograms per square meter, and my roof was designed for 30 kilograms per square meter. I'm sure we've still got 15 kilograms left after that. So what could the problem possibly be? And we have a lot of people just installing the panels now. And in all fairness, the roof won't collapse if it was designed properly. But the problem will come in when you get your next massive hailstorm, or that massive gust of wind that the roof was designed for. You know, that one in 100-year storm that comes. That's when we're going to see a lot of roofs collapsing if they didn't properly have a look to see if it was designed to carry the load of the solar panels. Also, the solar panels actually create some nice cavities for the hail to go and stack up against. So usually they will just roll off. And at this point, they're going to actually stack up and it's going to accumulate. And it happens quite quickly in a hailstorm. And that's where you might run into some trouble. So what we do is, if we go and check a roof for solar panels, you have to do an analysis of the roof truss that they used, get some sizes. If you have a design, it always helps me, the original design that was done. And then we look, can it take the 30 kilograms live load that it was designed for, plus an additional 15 kilograms for the solar panels? Then we know after your solar panel is up, and you get a hailstorm, you're still according to the SANS regulations and what they require for that. So yeah, I think also just from my experience, in terms of roof trusses failing, obviously we see it more often with tiled roofs because the tiles are so heavy. So if you have a tiled roof specifically, I would very take care specifically if you have a tiled roof to do a check before you get solar panels. If you have sheeting, metal sheeting, that would also require a check, but at least if something fails there, the sheeting sort of distributes the load evenly as well. So the danger of a dangerous collapse of tiles falling on people is less with a sheeted roof than with a tiled roof, for instance.
Okay, just practically then now, there might be some viewers now we need to do something. I installed solar panels, as I did as well, without anyone checking, and I actually know you, and I didn't do it. So, I mean, how many people installed solar panels without checking whatsoever? So now after the fact, if you want to do it, just for a random person out there, not knowing you, not being from Potch, where do they start? Who is the person that they need to contact to get in to come and do a quick check to make sure that everything is in order?
Yeah, I think if you want to get the design calculations properly done, I would suggest getting any roof manufacturer. They should be MyTech registered. MyTech is sort of the company overseeing most of the roofing fabricators. So if you can get a local roofing fabricator, just tell them, listen, usually it's just a section of the roof that you added the panels to. So it's not that they need to come and take measurements of the whole roof, which you can use as an argument to get the price down a little bit. It's one truss, or you can even help them to take some measurements and give the detail to them. So this is exactly what my truss looks like. That is the spacing, or get them to come and measure it, and then they can do a design check for you. And just for peace of mind, they can then give you a certificate afterwards saying that we did do a check on this roof. I think it's also important that you know that a lot of people, when they buy a new house, they obviously get a roofing certificate when they buy the house, okay? But when you now go and add solar panels to that, and there is a collapse or something that happens there, obviously that the original certification won't stand anymore because you made a change to the structure. So it is important to know that if you did that, if you had a roofing certificate, it's not valid anymore.
And I haven't done any research on that or read up whatsoever, but I would think quite possibly on page 1790, some small print in your insurance policy, there might be something about your roof and that everything has to be in place. And if it is not, that they won't pay out. So I think it might just also be a shout out for everyone, myself included, to just make sure in your insurance policy what is expected of you when you might put something on your roof or install solar panels, whether you maybe needed a certificate indicating that everything is fine or not, that when you run into trouble, that you are actually covered.
Oh, no, definitely. So in terms of insurance and structure, I have noticed that they very easily sign the contract to insure, but like you mentioned, there must be some sort of fine print at some point, because I've had numerous occasions where, for an example, some of my friends, their boundary wall just sort of the wind came up and it fell over, and they put in a claim for the boundary wall. It was insured, and the insurance company just basically came back and said, oh, this does not comply with the SANS standard, even though it was built in 1938 or whatever the case might be. I'm sorry, we can't help you. So it's just important to, either take them on and let them know that, listen, you said I will insure this. You could have done some checks yourself, or rather get someone to come and make sure that your boundary wall is according to a standard, or your roof is up to standard.
This episode is sponsored by Impact Engineers. Now, you will have known from the episode we spoke about Gtegno, it's the same guys. They've rebranded. They are your professional civil and structural
engineering services people. Fanus and his team provide comprehensive solutions for residential and commercial building products. They pride themselves on exceptional quality and service to you, their clients. So if you are in need of consulting engineering services, do not hesitate to contact them. Now, I know Fanus personally, and what this means is Fanus is the guy that comes to your house, and what he's done for me is show me which walls to knock out or where to put up your rings for muscle ups. But even more than that, visit their website and see the amazing commercial solutions that they provide. The projects that they have done successfully, they are your go-to guys for these solutions.
Okay, Fanus, we had a quick break and we've been speaking about cold plunge pools and barrel saunas and things like that. And I think both you and we quite involved on Instagram and following some people, especially with the CrossFit background regarding optimization, can we call it that? And yeah, so it will be great one day to maybe record a podcast in a cold plunge pool or in a barrel sauna. But it's not actually, I think, something we regularly see in South Africa. Moving over from the previous point, you mentioned as well that more and more, and I've actually spoke to a bond originator yesterday, that banks are getting stricter and stricter with giving out home loans just willy-nilly, and they've got lots more requirements these days. And you indicated previously as well that you now get contracted or mandated or whatever the case might be by banks before they grant the loan to go and do an inspection at properties. How does that work? Why do they do it? What's the implications of that?
Why do they do it? It's just basically passing the buck, you know. They have a property that they have to they need it to be in a good condition so that they don't lose the property that they loan the money against. And in the past, I think they've burnt their fingers too many times with old houses where they grant the loan and then the valuator did not see everything that they needed to see. And now what they started doing is they ask for structural certificates. They ask for a completion certificate looking at foundation, superstructure, the walls, whatever the case might be, and then also a roofing certificate. So that's something that we see more often. It's not easy at this stage yet for us because if I go to a house that was built in 1930 and I get into the roof, a lot of the times I see a lot of damaged roof trusses, and I've seen roof trusses where my recommendation was to take down the whole roof and redo it. Okay, now you've got the agent who already started spending the money that they would get from that sale, and I have to explain to them that this roof is not up to standard. So I've had quite a lot of angry agents and eager clients wanting to buy the property, being very mad at me, also owners of the property, just because it's unexpected for them to get that. And then they also tell me always, this roof has been standing for 75 years. It's been through all the winds that you could possibly think. Now you want to come and tell me that it's not up to standard. For me, it's not easy to do those inspections because some of those trusses were still handmade. I can't exactly compare it to the standards as we have it today. So I have to do some interpretation and still, I won't go overboard, but I have to now take the responsibility for that structure. So what would happen then is if the roof collapses now and the bank is in trouble because there's a major problem with their property where they loaned the money against, they can just pick up the phone and say, listen, Mr. Engineer, your professional indemnity would have to stand in for this. This is a claim. We had to replace the whole roof. It's a claim against you. So basically, we just take the responsibility for the structure. And in a certain sense, it's not, for me, in my position, it's not different than taking responsibility for a brand new house. In fact, with a brand new house, I was there when the foundation was done. I gave the design for the foundation. I had a look at I did all the due diligence beforehand. So for me, it's easier to certify a brand new house that I did all the designs for than to certify an older house. But when I want to obviously ask a fee to certify an old dwelling, people are like, this thing has been staying here and you want to ask me all this money. But so it's a bit of a difficult space for me, but it's happening more often now that banks would go out, the valuator would see a few things that he worries about. You would see some cracks or even water damage, or just worried about the roof. They usually look at the ridge. If they see it's sagging slightly, they would then just sort of make it part of the loan. What would you call it? The conditions in the loan, that they would have to get a structural engineer or a structural certificate for the roof, or even a report on the cracks, and will this structure fall apart, or will it still be fine in 50 years from now, or however long the term of the loan would be.
You've touched on cracks quite a bit now, and I know it's basically an impossible question, but what's the type of cracks when you see it, okay, don't worry about this, versus, okay, this is a crack that you do have to worry about? Is there a visual indication? Is there something that you can say, or is it just always better to get someone out?
In terms of cracks, I'm going to answer you in a different or a way that you might not expect. But I think we as South Africans used to staying in brick dwellings, we are too emotional about cracks, okay? So I've been to houses where you can literally put your hand through the crack, and you know what? The property still is not falling apart. I can't count the amount of times where women sort of phoned me and said, listen, my whole house is falling apart. What's happening? It's a very emotional thing to see a crack in a house, and we sort of feel that it's indicating there's a major problem. Okay, so sometimes cracks could indicate that there could be a problem with the foundation, but most of the times it's just general settlement cracks where a structure made from a lot of different materials, with the sun shining on it, with the cold weather. For just interesting, Potchefstroom is one of the, well, we're not just talking about Potch, but this specific area is one of the areas in South Africa, actually in the world, where the difference in temperature between morning and evening could vary by the largest margin. Okay, so you could have a -1 in the morning and a 24 in the evening in Potchefstroom. And the temperature changes has an effect on the roof, with thermal expansion. It has an effect on the structure. So sometimes the structure just sort of settles, especially if you extend it at a certain point, you're going to see a crack at that point. So I would get someone out to come and have a look. If you know that you are a person that you're not going to be able to live with that, obviously we can give you an indication if we're expecting it to happen more often, or if it's just a once-off thing. But then the other important thing is that in South Africa, we've come accustomed to polyfiller and paint. Okay, you do not fix a crack with polyfiller and paint. You can hide it for 6 months, but after that it'll just reappear. So I think the method that you are using to repair that crack, remember, it's still a rigid structure that got damaged now. Sometimes the crack is straight through a brick wall, and just by aesthetically, putting on some covering and painting it, it's not gonna, never move in that position again, especially if that is the weak point that was identified by the structure in that wall panel. So yeah, fixing a crack in the correct way is very important. And also sometimes what we even do is, if the structure showed you, I want to move in this area, there's obviously a reason for that. So there could be many reasons, but that's besides the point. We could introduce a movement control joint at that specific place. You fill it up with a paintable silicone and make it very neat. and it won't trouble anyone afterwards. So now you got the house for a great price because you managed to buy it with a few cracks, but you fixed it in such a way that it won't present as a crack in the future, because you control the movement that you have in that structure. If it is on a clay type soil, I think that's the one thing that I can mention. Clay, the problem with clay is it's not the same today as it is tomorrow. It changes all the time with the different moisture content that it has, if it dries out or if it gets wet. So if it is a very bad sort of H3 is the classification that we call it, type of clay type soil, it could be troublesome to the extent where you could sit with yearly maintenance. I would still not be too emotional to go, and I would never buy that property, because if you can still manage the cracks, but you might even get such a good price that, you know, to do a maintenance cycle once every 3 years would still be less than going and buying a place where you did not have the clay type soil. Because yeah, I've very rarely actually seen a house completely falling in on itself, just generally by the soil movement. So,
okay, I would love us now to move over to two things. Firstly, renovated properties, or not renovated properties. People that, okay, I want to renovate a bit now, and then to new properties. But first, let's take a look at renovations. My case in point, my wife and I, we renovated about 4 years ago, and quite randomly, I can't even remember how it happened, but you came and had a look at our roof. We had wanted to, I think, knock out 3 walls, and you came in just to check, okay, can we do it? Think about this and that, and I mean, you mentioned things that I never even knew existed. And Akon, you called it something earlier, but then with reinforcing the floor, making sure that in future that the tiles won't crack, things like that. So if there's people out there now that you've bought a house, oldish home, but now you want to do some renovations, you want to make like us, we had 3 different living room, study, kitchen, and now you want to knock out a few walls, make an open plan living area. What are the things that you need to think about, consider? Obviously, in this, people would like to just save money once again, go the cheap route or the easy route. But what do you need to make sure you have a think about it, have a check, make sure that you check your contractor about that, and make sure that it is in place?
Yeah, I think I mentioned something about that earlier, and I can maybe just elaborate on that. So in terms of structures, old and new, it's very difficult to marry. So if you have a wall panel that has a window opening currently, okay, that was built in 1975, and you now just take out the window, you want to close up that little square where the window was, and you take plaster, you paint over it, what's going to happen in a year from now? You're going to have a crack running exactly where the old piece was. And it sounds silly, you're smiling now, but that's what everybody does.
Exactly. And Potch houses, we had, I think 2 or 3 of that ugly yellow windows, that long yellow, and we did exactly that. And 6 months later, contractor, listen, cracks, can you come up, fix and fill and paint again? And it's exactly what happens.
Yeah, so consistency is key in terms of building your structure. So that's why if you pour a concrete slab, for instance, you want it to do it in one pour if you can. Otherwise, you're going to have a dry joint, and that's something that's very difficult to manage and make it look nice. So typically, if you don't have a wall panel that was built at the same time with the same mix and the same bricks, there are some certain things that you can do to try and avoid the cracks that you get there. For instance, using flatex or expanded metal. Now, I swear by that. It works really well to just reinforce that weak point to be stronger than it was, or stronger than it will ever be, even stronger than it would have been if you had a complete panel. So that's you get it in sheets of 2.4 by 1.2, and it's probably around 350 to 500 rand for one of those sheets. And if you look at the typical cost of a renovation these days, it's not something that will break the bank, but it could make a massive difference. Just on that, it's not. One of the questions that I get the most. Okay, I think we're gonna get there. I'm putting this one away again. I know we're gonna get to new houses, but yeah, I'll remind me of that one. So old and new, and then also different types of materials. You need to be aware that everyone has got a different way that it moves when it gets exposed to temperature. So if you have a concrete slab or a concrete beam and you've got brickwork next to that, you have to have a joint in the plaster between the two materials. Otherwise, over time, it'll just present with a crack in between the two. A thing that happens very often is, like you mentioned now, breaking out internal walls. And then people, make it nice and flat. They even sometimes take out the top brick where they removed the single leaf wall, fill it up with concrete, and now you've got a nice surface. They even put a screed over that sometimes to, just get the levels right, which is all great. But then they go and take tiles and they just tile straight over that. Okay, now you are sitting with a situation where you have a pre-existing surface bed below, surface bed here, and you have a foundation wall that was left there below whatever the compaction might be. So you have a variation between the separate parts of that floor, and if you go and tile over that, your tiles will present with a crack exactly at that point. So it's small things, but it's just important to note that there are some plans that you can make to try and alleviate the cracks that you're going to get there. But what I mostly recommend these days, if you have a few extra bucks, rather go for something like, if you do renovations, rather go for something that can accommodate some movement. If you know that you sort of covering an area with different surface beds, walls were removed, and it's not a consistent surface that you have, look at something like vinyl. It's a surface covering that you can get in any form and shape and look that you want. You can even make it look like tiles if you really wanted tiles. But then you at least have that peace of mind that if you have some movement at the bottom there, from whatever the situation is, it won't present through or crack through your tiles. And then also, if you're building against an existing structure, always have a movement control joint at that point. Most contractors will drill in and they break out bricks and they tell you, listen, this connection that we are making here will be so strong, it will never ever present with a crack. I inspected a house the other day and it had this crack stepping from the top to the bottom, and the client is mad. He's a lawyer, so he's already threatening, what's happening here, and I'm standing there and I'm looking at that crack, and there's no structural reason for the direction of the crack. It doesn't make sense that it could be the foundation, and I'm just struggling. And I told the contractor, just remove a piece of plaster for me. And when we open up there, we could see exactly what's going on. So it was a wall that was extended. They used a new type of brick at the top. They stepped back to try and tie in nicely. You had the old bricks there, and that was the explanation for the crack at that point. So if they may be covered with expanded metal, flatex, did it properly, you would have been able to save that. But even better would have been to just have a movement control joint at that point. People spend a lot of money on renovations these days. And one thing that you need to consider is getting the right contractor to assist you. And that, I always tell people, they always phone me and ask me, who should I use? And I've recommended some people to my friends, and then they ended up in court. Okay, so I always tell people, meet with the contractor. You have to be able to communicate with them. Contractors, the same as agents, like we spoke earlier, some of them have a bit of a bully attitude where they want to tell you, I'm the builder here, I'm going to do it my way, I've done this for many years, you don't know, so let me do this, stay away, when I'm done you can pay me, and then a few weeks later, you get some cracks, you get some issues, and then it's difficult to work from there. And it might sometimes even be things that you noticed while they were busy with you. You were just too scared to ask. So select a contractor that you feel comfortable with to ask them to rebuild a section of wall. If you get there and you see that it's skew, tell them it's skew, please rebuild it. If they don't want to, rather end the relationship there and get someone else to come and continue. So it needs to be someone that you feel comfortable to have an open conversation with and tell them what you want as well and what's important to you. I think in the space of renovations, just to bring the contractor to the renovation space, unfortunately, some of the big contractors with a lot of experience find renovations, because they also know about all the trouble. They focus on larger projects or new houses, and they prefer to stay in that space. So unfortunately, sometimes, not always, but in the renovation space, you get the guy who did not get the new house. So just make sure that you have a competent contractor that's a person that is willing to listen to you, or to an engineer that you may be appointed to come and oversee that process, because people spend millions of rands on a renovation, and then ideally what they want in their hearts is that it must be a new house now. We've spent 2 million rand on this house, it needs to be a new house. And when some of the cracks start appearing, or you realize that it sort of breaks a lot of people, and I see that often as well. So yeah, make sure it's a competent contractor and someone that you can relate to and have a great conversation with. Because it's again a lot of money that you're spending, and you want to be able to also know that person would come back afterwards. So phone references before you tell them, did you renovate another house? Yes, okay, which one? No, it was for the president, and it was so good that they wanted to hire me, and then just go there with them, and then you'll speak to the other client as well, and you'll quickly realize that you in for trouble, or that you have the right person.
And I think just to realize again that there's more to it than meets the eye. Like you said, if a renovated, you put on a new roof or different roof now over the stoep or whatever that you build now, the angle needs to be correct, or new and old doesn't meet. So just to ask the contractor, okay, I got this quote now, but sit down with him and go point for point through it. Because they might say, okay, listen, we're going to put tiles here, but okay, are we going to strengthen? Are we going to put in alternative or extra things to make sure that there's not a crack in the tile? Because that's usually, it's below the surface, so that's where we're going to try to save money, I would think. And that's where you're going to burn your fingers. You're going to live there for another 10, 15 years, but the cracks are going to be there after 2. And you're like, yes, we paid 500,000 or 2 million, whatever the case might be, for these renovations, and now we have these issues.
Yeah. So I just want to interrupt you there. You mentioned something, closing stoops. South Africa, if you are listening now, most of the times the stoop doesn't have a foundation at the bottom. It's just a surface bed that they cast to have a little braai there. And then I've seen it so many times where people go and build a nice load-bearing wall on the edge of that stoop, and they close it with a roof that doesn't have a proper slope, because you are sort of screwed with the angle the roof is coming. So what else can you do? They use the wrong sheeting to do that. I've had some people using a tiled roof, which is even worse at a small slope. So yeah, it's just very important when you want to close a stoop. Just be very, very careful. And it all boils down to the insurance again. So we've had another case where the client claimed ceiling damage for leaks on his stoop, and the insurance basically just came out, had a look at the slope of the roof, measured it, wrote a small report saying the roof is not according to standards. Unfortunately, we cannot pay out. Now you have to remember, they had some proper water running into that area there. Replacing a ceiling is not cheap these days. And at that specific one, they had a mat that was damaged below as well. and then also some furniture that, expensive wooden items that got some water damage. And now where do you go now? You see that's where the difficult part. If you had a roofing certificate, at least you could contact the structural engineer to take responsibility, or to tell you how could he certify something that was not right, or at least write a counter report to the insurance. But other than that, you basically going to replace all of that with your own money.
Okay, Fanus, let's move over to new properties. Okay, Fanus, so you basically interrupted yourself on a full of energy. You wanted to delve into something specific with newly renovated properties, and a question you always get or often get. Now you have the opportunity to go down your rant before we get into specific things. What did you want to delve into at that stage?
All right, so we're going to talk about newly built properties at the moment. So if we talk about the foundation of your new property, one of the questions that I get a lot from contractors, from clients, is why do I need to put steel reinforcing into my foundation? All right, and for me, it's a question that I really don't understand why people are asking me that question, because every time I've done the calculation, in terms of the amount of reinforcing that we are putting into the foundation, it's always been less than 1% of the total building cost of that property. And the amount of reinsurance that you are getting for putting reinforcing into your foundation, that's sort of the starting point and the base. And I think it maybe shows something about how we are thinking as people in South Africa. We would spend 20% on kitchen finishes of the total cost. If you look at windows and double glazing and whatever the fancy things is that we do, we spend large amounts of money on that, but we're not willing to start correctly with a base and the foundation, even like the Bible tells us, to get your foundation right and put it on a solid rock. So why do you put reinforcing into a foundation? It's just for if you have a varying bearing capacity at a certain point. So there might be a lot of different things that could cause that. You could have some termites that, even after the house is built, create a nest directly underneath your foundation, and they open it up there. And if you need to span with a concrete foundation, if you have any loss of support at any point, if you have a tap next to your foundation that is running all the time, and you make that section wet all the time and the rest stays dry, you're going to have a differential load bearing capacity on that section, and that's where reinforcing comes in. Concrete does not like tension. It can take a lot of compression, but the moment you put concrete under tension, it breaks. And that's why with all the old houses that I'm expecting where they did not use reinforcement in the foundation, you'll see that it just physically breaks the foundation at that point. So for something that is as important as your foundation and being able to withstand whatever trouble there might be in the future, I would definitely spend my less than 1% on reinforcing in a foundation. But that's just one thing. In terms of new houses, I think there are so many small things that make a big difference. In my area, it's sometimes difficult because, to be honest, it's not that difficult to build. A lot of people knows the basics about brickwork and how to lay a brick and how your mortar mix should be done, and just getting the basics of building, and that makes it a little difficult to try and influence people in that space, because they think it's just easy. You can just take whatever. I know Pete builds. Let me get Pete to come and build it for me. And then you end up with some trouble later. So there are a lot of small things that you can also do to make sure that your new property is in order. One of the things would be to, obviously, same point as earlier, to make sure that your contractor is competent, that they have the knowledge that they need. And then also, it's very important, go to the previous places that they built themselves. go and have a look, speak to the clients there, and you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. Francois, the amount of people that has contacted me with builders running away with their money, it's just, I understand you obviously get a lot of people in that space where they needed the cash flow, so you pay them 100,000 to go and buy bricks. They just buy 50,000 rand worth of bricks and they start building, and then they promise themselves they're going to buy the other 50,000 rand worth of bricks. But life happened and they used that money, and then you phone them and what happens? You can't get a hold of them and they've disappeared. It happens so often. But if you contacted just one or two of their previous clients, you would have known this is not the way to go. So just be a little bit more diligent with the selection process. If you're going to build a new house, go and visit some of the other sites, speak to the clients staying there. It's also important because you get some scaly people and they can tell you this and that, but you're only going to get the truth if you're also speaking to the owners of the previous properties that they built. If we're hiring someone, we always phone their references. So what I'm saying is, if you get a new contractor to build your new house, you're going to spend a lot of money. Make sure that you phone their references as well. It's just a basic point.
If someone comes to you, or maybe someone watching this and they're, okay, we're dreaming, in a year or two we want to build our own, we've bought an empty attic, and we want to start now with the planning of building our own place or new place. If there's a few pointers that you can give them, or a message, right? Well, listen, this is what you have to be prepared for, look out for. What would some of those points be?
Okay. Okay, so where do I start? I would obviously, a very important thing for me, and that's just my perspective maybe, is that you need to establish a budget that you can afford, okay? And then your first point of contact would probably be an architect, okay? Why is it important to have a good set of plans? It's important because that is what the contractors, or whoever it will be that will tender to build your house, that's the document that they would use to give you an accurate price of what it will cost to build that property. So I've had many people where they knew someone who is very fancy on paint, and you get a set of plans, very basic, and you give that to the contractor. They give you all the promises, we're going to build this for that amount of money, and when it comes to the detail at the end of the day, you don't have a proper window schedule that came with your plan. You don't have a door schedule. And then when the contractor phones you and says, listen, I need payment for all the doors and windows, and you tell them, listen, you said you're going to build this house, and he's going to tell you, look, I allowed only for this. You didn't mention that. You didn't mention that you wanted tiles in your house. My goodness, what type of house do you want? That's the type of chances they take. So the first step is very important to go and get a competent architect to draw up some detailed plans for you. And the more detail they can add there, the more accurate you will get a quote when you're going to build that property. And the less likely you are of getting surprises during the process. Also, don't let the 3D renderings, when you get to the architect, get to you in terms of just overexcitement. Because one thing that unfortunately happens a lot, and it might also be because of the competence of the architect, if you meet with them, they are supposed to ask you, what is your budget? The first question shouldn't be, how many squares do you want? What rooms and movie theater and swimming pool? First question with the architect should be, what is your budget? And you have to tell them that they need to stay within that budget. I've had many houses where it's gone through the whole process where the architect did the drawings. The drawings came to me. I did all my designs because they wanted accurate quotes, concrete slabs designs, roofs. And then when they get to the final total quotation from the contractors, it's a lot of times more than 50% over what they initially wanted to budget for. Then they have to go back okay, to that architect. Sometimes it ends up in a fight because they maybe did mention what the budget was. And they have to get a different architect to go and make whatever they did smaller. And that is sort of a negative way. You don't want to, you already have to let go of some of the dreams that you had. And it's just that the process starts on a bad foot. So get a competent architect to give you accurate drawings. Take those drawings, and then I would also vouch for a quantity surveyor. Okay, now quantity surveyors, in terms of cost, would probably be in the same space as your structural engineer or the architect. So they are not cheap. They cost quite a bit of money, but that is what they do. They calculate what the property will cost you. They measure every single brick, everything that you're going to have in that house, every tap, and they can give you the best accurate bill of quantities document that you can then give to people to quote. So if you want to take out all the stops, first stop architect, second stop quantity surveyor, and then from there get a competent building contractor to tender for the job. Make sure you check their qualifications and previous work, and then you can start from there, and then you can eliminate a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah. Where do you fit in this process?
Okay. So there are a lot of entry points where we get involved, but the first step then would be after the plans were drawn up by the architect, the quantity surveyor did their thing, or even in between there we can come in. If the quantity surveyor, sometimes they want some detail in terms of what type of slab we're going to use, the foundations, will it be a raft foundation or a strip foundation? So sometimes we complete our designs before it goes to the quantity surveyor, and then they take it from there. So we also do the NHBRC registration. So what a lot of people are not aware of the NHBRC. It is a council, according to what I understand, is that in the past banks gave people building loans to go and build a new house. Okay, now they got Wimpy to come and build the house, but Wimpy didn't do it properly, and that property looks bad within 5 years, and it loses a lot of value. And the bank wants to take back the property, and it's not even worth 50% of what their loan was that they gave out. So they had a lot of problems like that. So they, as far as I understand it, they got together and decided that we need to get a governing body to come and make sure that the property is up to a standard, but also give a guarantee to the bank that property is up to a specific standard. Okay, so that is what they do. The cost for NHBRC is something that you, as a new owner, would have to pay to get your property registered at the NHBRC. So it's a form that you get from us. We are the competent person on that form that fills the first part in, but then also very important, your contractor also needs to be registered with the NHBRC. They go and do a specific exam, and then they make sure that that it is that they know what they need to know to be able to build that house. NHBRC is something that people not really aware of, and it is a cost that sometimes catches them off guard when they're building a new property. So when you register,
sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you there. How much of a cost are you talking about?
So to enroll your new property, it is a fee scale that you would have to go and exactly see what the amount would be, but it's more or less 1.3% of the total development cost, including the price of what you paid for your stand. So it's quite a bit of money, but then you get that 5-year guarantee from the NHBRC. Okay, now what the value is of that guarantee is debatable. I've had some friends who had a slab that collapsed, and it took them 2 years of vigorously and relentlessly continuing to delve, and they got some money back, and they did pay for it. So it's not completely worthless from my experience. But the important part is that you need to be aware that you cannot get a loan from a bank without your property being enrolled with the NHBRC. So I've had some people sitting in my office refusing to pay NHBRC costs. And then what happened is, because they said they're going to build cash, they won't ever sell the property. And then unfortunately they had someone die in their family, or they had to move urgently, or someone was relocated and they wanted to sell the property. And if it's still within that 5-year period and the people that want to buy a house wants to get a loan, they're not going to be able to get a loan without having that enrollment certificate. So it is important. There is an inspector as well from the NHBRC that sometimes comes to visit the site while construction is busy. And in certain areas they are better than in other areas, but they've added some value in the past where they saw some things that the builder did that was not according to the manual. And then they will write a non-compliance to the builder, and they have to submit that to the engineer. We have to give a solution how to fix that before they are allowed to continue on that site. So there is a bit of safety with that as well, and that is the NHBRC, just so that people are aware of that.
I think that's a good point, and I had just quickly specific case myself where I wanted to sell a property, and then we only then realized, or well, the bank realized that there was a mistake with the NHBRC certificate with the first transfer, and then it was a total mess. And then also there's a specific development in Potch with transfers I've done on that I've realized the banks, I think there might be a red flag on their system or something, but they always want the NHBRC certificate with that specific development, and it's always an issue. So it's something, and especially with that larger cost, I mean 1.3% of 5 million or 10 million, it adds up at the end of the day. Fanus, at the beginning, we spoke about cars and happiness and joy and things like that. And in our preparation for this, you also spoke about something, well, that's close to your heart, that you've seen. And I know we know each other outside of this as well. And I know, I mean, you care about people. And you mentioned that you've seen lots of people, or not lots, but you've seen people spending so much money, building this dream house, building this, or maybe building a dream, and at the end of the day, when they get into that property, that it's not really what they hoped for. Can you speak a bit to that?
Yes, yeah, definitely. That's something that's very close to my heart, and I think that comes in with what is really, you know, there's that old saying, what makes a house a home, you know, and it's, for me, it's obviously more the people and the relationships that you have with the people that you are staying there with, regardless where you stay. I've seen people extremely happy living in terrible circumstances, but the relationships that they have inside that building is what makes it. So we don't have the American dream, we have the, let's call it the South African dream, and I've seen it so often, and that's what I told you about, that you get people that's been working their whole life, you know, saving to build their dream house, okay? And they are so excited, they get to the architect and they do the 3D renders, you know, and then when they ask, do we need to add, you know, a fire pit in the middle, and it's like, yes, you know, honey, we've worked so hard, let's put a fire pit there, you know, and they get all the magazines and spend some time on Pinterest and whatever the case might be, and they sort of have this whole dream that they've been striving towards for a very long time, and then they start building that property. Again, in the beginning, they're so excited when they come and see me, you know, and I tell them that I'll help you with it, make sure that the structure is proper, and they're excited, and then the money starts flowing into this dream that you are building. And I can't tell you how many times when we do the final inspection, after this glorious house is now built, I see older people usually standing there, and I can see in their eyes that the excitement is gone now. You know, at the end of the day, it just is a place that you're going to sleep, and spend some time with. I think it's important to have a house and to make it worth your while, but do not overspend on your property. Most of the times with those projects as well, they usually end up with 30 to 40% over what they originally wanted to spend, just because it's you cannot also say that it's your dream, but some of the things are not perfect. I've had people where that great house is now standing there, but now suddenly they forgot that the stand that they bought is 4,000 squares and they have to now do some landscaping there. And my goodness, Francois, do you know what landscaping costs these days? And then they spend all that money because now you've got this perfect house that was part of the dream, but where will my kleinkinders, where would they run around on that property? So yeah, I think it's just very important to not overspend when you buy or build a new house. Even if you're young and it's your first property, rather take it back and go lower than you wanted to. The value of your property will, at the end of the day, not be for yourself. I'm not talking about financially. For yourself, be in the walls that you built or how you built it. It will be what the relationships are like inside that building. So that's just something that's very important to me.
That's awesome, and I think it's so important, and it's something I think about as well, and so many times. And I think at the end of the day, joy and happiness and things like that comes from within, and it's never, I think, gonna be given to you from things from the outside. You get a new house or a new car, and there's just a bigger house or a bigger car or better, and if that's your measurement, you're always going to be disappointed. And I think the golden thread throughout this whole conversation would be selling peace of mind, how to make the right decisions, how to be at peace with where you are and what you have with your property, being sure that if you renovate it or newly build that everything that has to be in place is in place. And that brings me, I think, to our last point today, is in South Africa, we usually have some sort of security in and around our property, and we up until now always just had standard beams and I don't even know what you call it in English, but oogies that picks up movement. But I've been more and more intrigued with a product that you know quite well, SpotBot, which you can actually see what's going on. You're not wondering or thinking. If you're on holiday, you can see if something is triggered, the alarm is triggered, if it was someone or it was just a false alarm. So I'm going to tee you up with that, and you can tell the viewers a little bit about SpotBot, how does it work, what it is, and yeah, I just want to learn a bit as well.
Okay, yeah, Francois, you need to get the SpotBot. That's very important. The first thing is we're going to get you a SpotBot, and then next time I'm not going to be the one talking, you will be, I promise you, because it really works well. So what is SpotBot? SpotBot is a standalone device that you add to your network where your CCTV cameras are installed on, and it detects the video streams from that network, and it does human detection on those streams. Okay, as soon as the camera, your eye can see a human in the frame, it will immediately flag that and send that picture to your phone via a Telegram application that they developed. And then you can for sure know from that picture that what you're seeing is either a threat or it's just the person working in your garden or whatever the case might be. So yeah, it basically changes. I've had it so many times, actually here in Potchefstroom twice. Before we had a SpotBot where a person jumped over the wall, took my son's bike, jumped back over the wall. The next morning, well, the bike shouldn't have been outside, but that's a whole different conversation. Took the bike and they left, and then afterwards we could see on the camera, oh yeah, he comes, gets over the wall. I could even see what he looks like, but what can you really do with that? So cameras, he even looked up to the cameras. They're not scared of cameras anymore these days, because they know that it's not a real-time alert or a real-time notification. Okay, so you've got beams, which does that. It alerts you, but what's the problem with beams? So I had beams, and then you wake up in the middle of the night with a cold sweat because you heard the alarm going off, and it's beam number 1. It shows their beam 1. So I usually run to the window, or I run to my cameras, and I get there and I see, I don't know what it is. Was it a human? What triggered the beam? You don't know, because the beam doesn't have eyes. Okay, so what SpotBot does is it converts your CCTV camera to be like a beam as well. In real time, it alerts you and gives you a notification that there is a human shape in that specific area. Sends the picture to you, but it also sends the picture to your security company. Okay, and they love that, because now suddenly they've got a picture of what the person is that they need to maybe capture. And the guys with the response teams are so excited about that, because now finally they don't have to drive to a property at full speed, not knowing if it's a false alarm or not. They know what the person looks like, they know he's there. And what I find these days is that if it is a SpotBot alert and they've notified us that they are coming, you'll find that there's sometimes 3 or 4 cars from the same security company rocks up there, just because they are so excited they're gonna finally, they know that there is a problem there, and they can assist. And also then you can bring justice to actually catch the people and get them out of society, so that we have less and less problems.
Yeah, no, I love it, and it's just the exactly what you say, and we with beams as well. Beam goes off, you switch it off, you switch it on again, and then you hope that if the person moves again, and if it doesn't go off, you go back to sleep, and
then the security company phones and they ask you, are you all right? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So and it's actually amazing, but it's going to give you, it gives you closure, and that's what everyone wants, and just surety of what's going on in your surroundings. Fanus, I want to be respectful of your time, and we're actually running out of camera as well. There's so many things we can discuss in the future as well. Thank you for sharing this with us. I really appreciate it, and we'll share a link in the show notes for people where they can find you, and if they want to use your services or anything like that. Really appreciate it. It was great to have you on, and hopefully we can speak soon again.
Yeah, thanks, Francois. I will see you tomorrow morning at CrossFit.
Definitely. Thanks.
Thanks, it was great.